Over the last month, Little Wars TV has interviewed industry and hobby thought leaders to explore how we can grow the audience for historical wargaming. Today, we're looking at a unique board game with the kind of crossover appeal that we think can serve as a gateway to new players. Greetings, Little Warriors. I'm Greg. I am joined today by Chal, and in this review, we are going to be taking a look at a board game that was published this year, 2020, by Osprey Games, Undaunted North Africa. This is a sequel game to Undaunted Normandy, which was published earlier, but this is a standalone product. You don't need to have Undaunted Normandy in order to play this game. So Chal, what are we going to cover in the review today?
Okay, so basically, unlike our other rules reviews for a board game or a box game, what we're looking at is three different categories. The first one is the most obvious one, is the box, what comes in the box, what kind of components are you going to get. Then we're going to talk about how a game turn plays, what the flow, the mechanics are, and then a wrap-up category of final thoughts. How do we really feel about the system in its entirety?
If you stick around to the end of the review, you will hear how you can win a free copy of Undaunted North Africa. Thanks to our friends at Osprey Games, we are going to send one of our viewers a copy of this game. Make sure you stick around till the end. All right, well, let's get started with our first category.
Okay, so right away, I'm going to open up this box, and you have a scenario book, you have rules, a little advertisement for Undaunted Normandy, which is fine, and you have a series of high quality, double-sided counters. You have what is extremely important for this game system are two decks. These are vehicle cards. Muy importante, we have terrain tiles. Right off the bat, with the components and what's in the box, it's obvious, and it's no surprise, Osprey has an extremely long history of publishing. The print quality is very high, the art quality is very high. The only thing that I would say that I noticed in the decks that we played before, it seems like the cards are a little thinner than what I'm used to, even for like a playing deck.
Yeah, they're a little bit lighter weight than a standard playing card, and that led during our game to maybe a couple ears on the card getting dog-eared or bent a little. Nothing major.
No.
But it does stand out because the rest of this stuff, I mean, this is like heavyweight cardboard, nicely textured printing. All of it has beautiful artwork. The cards, cardboard, everything. I love the style of the art. A little on the cartoony side, but I think it's in keeping with the theme of the game, and I think what you get in the box is really nice.
But yeah, this is a high quality product, absolutely.
Yeah, and in addition to the quality of the materials, I also think that we ought to highlight the experience of Osprey and publishing shows in the rule book itself. Not just the look, but within 10 minutes of cracking open this very short rule book, you're going to know how to play the game. Everything is really professionally laid out inside this book. I thought it was very tight, very clearly written. Okay, so now that we've told you what you get in the box, let's talk a little bit about how you set up a game of Undaunted North Africa and what a turn looks like. And I'll start with this book that I was just holding a second ago. You had mentioned scenario books. So in addition to the rule book, you're going to get a scenario book, and that is important because you can't really play this game without scenarios. And there are 11 scenarios printed in this book. You can play them in any order, but Chal and I started at the beginning, and I would recommend that you do that because they build in complexity as you go, so scenario 1 is the best possible beginner scenario. And when you open up this book and you start a scenario, it's going to tell you a couple things. First of all, it's going to tell you in what order and positions to set up all of the different terrain tiles, and they do all look different. They have different terrain printed on them. So each setup is going to be unique and use a different number of tiles. This scenario book is also going to tell you which cards each player needs to have in their hand, and we'll talk more about the cards in a minute because this is a deck building game. That's a major component of how you play. So you need to know what cards to start with and which cards to have in reserve. And finally, it's going to tell you what your objectives and your missions are, how long the scenario is, and how to play. So it's very comprehensive, and within a couple of minutes of cracking it open, you're going to be set up to start turn 1 of the game.
So as you start the game, you have a stack of what I would call like the active cards. There are other cards that may be pulled in because you have the ability to drag more cards into the deck. And the reason that you're going to do that is there are tokens for specific types of troops. And each of these types of troops have a specific role within the game. Now this is very, very important. We first started playing our first game and we did this like right out of the box. It wasn't even like we did a full read through. And we were able to play. First thing I got confused about was, well, where's my lieutenant? Because there's lieutenant cards and I can't find a lieutenant. And then you realize that that's an abstraction of leadership, but that you will have somebody that is a machine gunner, you have somebody that's a rifleman, you have somebody that's a scout, you have somebody that does demolitions. So what you want to do is be able to produce more cards of the types of troops that you want to activate. So let's say that Greg has an LRDG sapper engineer trying to blow up my Italian planes. My machine gunner may try to shoot at him, and what I'd be doing if I'm successful is having Greg remove that engineer card so that his engineer is less and less likely to be effective within the game.
Well, that is something that I think the game definitely gets right. It does feel period appropriate because the mechanics of this game, while simple, encourage you to use your troop types in historically accurate ways. So when you look at the cards, each one of the unit types has different abilities. They have different actions printed on the bottom of the card. So your machine gunner is better at suppressing enemy targets than, say, your scout. Your scout is going to be better at discovering new terrain tiles. So these very, very simple and kind of basic abilities, I think, really lend themselves toward you trying to use the units in historically accurate ways.
Well, actually, I'll take it a step further. Is the game designed for the specific troop types? It doesn't just encourage you, it actually limits you.
It does.
For example, to control a tile, you are going to have to use your rifleman.
Right.
Your machine gunner can't control a tile. I mean, he can't flip to the control. So there's a thing here that you can't just rely on one troop type. You're going to have to learn as a player to manage the various troop types in conjunction with each other to be successful in the game. Like you mentioned, scout. I love. You know, there's so many games that we play that scouting it's such a critical part of real combat, but it's hard to translate into, say, a miniatures tabletop game. Here, it's very clearly defined. If you want to be able to move troops into a new tile, your scout has to go first.
Right.
So if you somehow manage to eliminate a scout, the other player's basically stuck, and all he can do is respond with fire from distance, which may prevent the other guy from winning. But you definitely have to use your scout. You don't have any choice.
Yep, so wrapping up our discussion of the different unit types in the game, I should point out that this is a difference between the original game, Normandy, and North Africa. There are new unit types that are introduced here, like the Demolitions Expert, also vehicles. I don't know that we need to spend too much time talking about how they work, but vehicles are not in Undaunted Normandy, and I think that they're handled really well in Undaunted North Africa. There's cards in here for them. They function in largely the same ways, but you can have multiple crewmen in a vehicle. So I thought that was a really nice introduction of new unit types into the game.
Yeah, and as far as the vehicles, I think they made a good decision, whether it was intentional or not. I'm assuming that it was intentional, is that they went with light vehicles. Right. Okay, there's not like some opportunity for a Yag Panther to come rolling into North Africa out of nowhere. I know it's ahistorical, but forgive me, please. But the vehicles are very light, so they make a lot more sense to be incorporated into a scenario that's mainly focused on infantry.
Now, how about a little bit of comedy in our review here? I want to read to players a line in the second scenario that when Chal and I read scenario 2, The Hammer, we laughed for a couple of minutes about this. So this is something that you're only going to hear in Undaunted North Africa. It says at the bottom of scenario 2, and you know what line is coming here, Chal.
I know.
It says, "Remember, the Italian tank is a powerful vehicle that demands respect. With its high attack, anti-tank, and suppress values, it's a versatile powerhouse that can take control actions to seize objectives." I think that's the first time anyone has ever called an Italian tank a powerhouse.
Yeah, you're not going to find that in any other history book, I guarantee it.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. But that little bit of comedy aside, I think the vehicles are really well handled and represented in this game. One other thing I want to mention about the card deck building nature of this battle is that there are also something called Fog of War cards. This is in the original game. They've carried it over here to Undaunted North Africa, where periodically throughout the game, as you scout new tiles, you will have to add junk cards into your hand. They're called Fog of War cards. It's basically just hand clutter, because as you keep drawing new cards, 4 new cards every turn, a couple of them are, as you go on in the battle, more and more are going to be these Fog of War cards that you just kind of have to waste. And I think that is a great mechanic, because not only do they clutter your hand as the game goes on, you can use one of your officers to try and get rid of the Fog of War cards and clear your hand back up. It's a really slick mechanic, really elegant mechanic that provides a little bit of friction into this game.
Yeah, and I think we're almost at the point that we're sort of drifting into the final thoughts, because that's where we start coming into what is our overall opinion of the system. And what you're mentioning right there is, I think, one of the big strengths of this game is it is, I believe, simple to learn. And I would suggest actually just playing it. Like, just set it up and start playing it, because it's going to make a lot of sense as soon as you start. But there is a complexity, and the complexity is you have to make those decisions. You have to make the decisions of what of the individual troop responsibilities you focus on, because there's more than one for each type of troop. And then also, what is your approach to the deck? Is your approach to the deck to try to drag in what are currently inactive cards into your active deck, making it more likely you're able to get actions out of your troops? Or do you try to combat the increasing Fog of War? So there's a lot of decisions, and because there's so many decisions, it gives you some sort of tacit control over this deck, because it's your approach. And I like that. I like that it's not just like we're using straight up, it's a king of clubs, so that means this. No, you have to make decisions early in the game how you're going to handle the deck of cards that are active.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts about this game is that it provides something for veteran wargamers, like Chal and I. We've been playing war games together, you and I, for 20 years. This might even be a little bit on the simple side for us, but there was still enough decision making, and you can get through these scenarios really quickly. I mean, you and I ripped through the first 2 scenarios in about an hour.
Yeah.
So if you're a veteran wargamer, you're going to just be able to kind of move through these and get new tactical situations. Or if you've never played a war game, or if you're maybe trying to introduce, took a copy home for your daughters, because I think for new players, this is a really nice entry point. It feels like a board game, it looks like a board game, and it's easy to learn, but you're introducing some elements of what would be sort of akin to a miniature skirmish game.
Yeah, very much so. And in fact, that's sort of where it fits. It fits in a niche between the two. You could, theoretically, I guess you could actually replace the tokens with miniatures.
Now, despite all of the praise that we're heaping on Undaunted North Africa, I do want to point out a couple of things that I wish had been done differently in this game. One of the changes that they made from Undaunted Normandy that I didn't care for is a cosmetic change, but in Undaunted Normandy, your tokens represent larger groups of men. We're talking about sections and squads. In Undaunted Normandy, you're a platoon commander. In this game, each one of these tokens is a guy. It's a single person. You are commanding at times maybe only 3 or 4 people on this miniature battlefield. And for the point of scale, I kind of wish they'd stuck with the original. I liked the concept that I was a platoon commander of maybe an understrength platoon. I know that it's only a cosmetic difference, but to me, I enjoyed that scale of game a little bit more.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting observation. I had noticed that. I hadn't even thought about it, though, until you mentioned it. And I wonder that rather than just being a cosmetic change, it may be because of the focus here. The focus, unlike Normandy, the focus here in North Africa is very much on the SAS. I think I mentioned LRDG earlier, but SAS raids.
Right.
And I think there maybe is the decision behind that is to make it individual soldiers, because now we're talking in these little SAS groups roaming around North Africa at high speed, striking the Italians where they least suspect it. And maybe that's why they did that.
It may have been a thematic choice. Yeah, it may have been a thematic choice. Another criticism I would have that actually applies to both of these games is, to be honest, I think 12 scenarios is really not enough. because you can't even really play this game without scenarios. And for guys like you and I who are going to rip through these things in like 30 minutes each, this book only has 11 scenarios. Undaunted Normandy has 12. And I know that they did come out with a bonus scenario for each one, but I feel like there should be a lot more scenario options. At the very least, there should be some advice in this book or online for how to build your own scenarios. Sort of tips for how the rule authors recommend that you go about that in order to provide a little bit more variety to the game. Because the scenarios are fun, and the ones in the North Africa book I think are actually much more interesting than the ones in the Normandy book. Normandy, the Americans and the Germans are very comparable forces, and the scenarios are, capture this objective. In Undaunted North Africa, it feels much more like an asymmetrical game. So I think that is an improvement.
No, but I do think your criticism, it's critique of the limitation on the number of scenarios, because it is totally scenario driven, as you said earlier. This is not a thing that you show up in like a ring-in battle and say, oh, I'm just going to throw this out here, because it's just not going to work.
No.
You would have to really think about how to put it together. Now, I have not committed time to trying to do that on my own.
People have online.
But people do.
Yes.
That's actually not a bad suggestion. If there'd be a way to just kind of give like a basic guideline for developing scenarios to try to help people.
My last criticism I want to mention is something I really wish they had included in this game, was some kind of solo play component. When you and I were sitting here playing this, the whole time I'm thinking, you know what? This has the bones of what could be a really good solo game because it's so structured with the cards. There's a whole bunch of ways that they could handle that. And no sooner did I get home from playing this game the first time than I went online, and Osprey is working on a supplement called Undaunted Reinforcements, where they're going to, I think, try to solve a bunch of my criticisms. They're going to offer a solo play mode. They're going to offer more scenarios for both versions. And they're actually going to offer rules for how to do a 2 versus 2 4-player version of the game, which I think sounds really interesting. So we've rambled on long enough. Let's wrap this thing up by asking what we ask at the end of every rule or board game review. Is it worth the price? And in the case of Undaunted North Africa, you're looking at £30, close to $40 right now for this box. What's your thought on the value proposition at that price point?
Okay, we've established this. If you ever watch these series, okay, I'm a real cheapskate.
The cheapest of the cheapskates.
I'm the cheapest of the cheapskates.
Yeah.
The truth of it is that at $40, it's a high quality product. We talked a little bit about the cards. It's the only thing that I'd say that they're a little flimsy. You do have to use these a lot. But man, this thing is going to last a long time. Like unless you douse this with lighter fluid and set it on fire, these tiles, they're durable. They're durable. The same thing with the tokens. So this is a game that you're going to have for a very long time. I think you get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So $40, I don't think it's a bad price for it. I think that you'll feel like you really got something for that money.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that it's only $40. This feels like a product that easily could have been $50 or $60. You mentioned the cards as your only reservation. My only reservation, again, comes back to the scenarios. For $40, I wish there were more than 11. Feel like there should have been, maybe 15, 20, something like that. But maybe down the line, that's something Osprey is going to work on, releasing additional PDFs and supplementary material. So I feel the price is a good value, and if we're talking about whether or not you should go out and buy this game, as veteran wargamers, you and I both really enjoyed playing, going to continue to play, and I think if you're looking to introduce somebody new into the hobby, this is the perfect gateway crossover from board gaming, one step away to miniature wargaming.
Absolutely, and I think too that in particular for the North Africa box, because it is so targeted to this role of the small unit commando actions, that I think that's really even more of an appeal for certain types of readers. I'm thinking of people that read.
It's a cool theme.
Yeah, you're like, that's
North
really
Africa,
cool. You know. And I think, this is totally accessible. And you just have to buy the box. And that's always like the benefit of a board game over a miniatures game.
I know.
You don't have to paint anything. You don't have to buy 12 different things. You just buy the box, and that's it.
Right.
So how can you possibly win this free copy? I'll tell you how, very simply. All you have to do is leave a comment below and suggest to us what theater you would like to see Osprey explore with the Undaunted system.
Yeah, personally, I am thinking, I know you and I have talked about this, something on the East Front like a Stalingrad. This feels like a great game with the tiles, that each tile would be like a building,
Yeah.
and that you could move through urban warfare. Or maybe something in the Pacific.
Like a Tarawa
Yes.
or a Saipan, where I could see there's something in the mechanics here of that back and forth chess type of play that would be kind of interesting.
Absolutely. So whatever you guys think, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And one of you randomly will be selected to win a free copy of Undaunted North Africa. Also, a quick reminder while we're talking about this game is that if you have not heard our new podcast, Little Wars FM, one of the most recent episodes that we have available on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, is an interview with the head of Osprey Games. We are going to talk to the head of Osprey Games about Undaunted, as well as where he sees these kind of crossover games going in the future. A really fun, wide-ranging interview.